the impeccable facade hides secrets. Behind the walls of a luxurious mansion, a young woman shaped by perfection discovers that not all that glitters is gold, and that the cost of maintaining appearances can be devastating. Amid alliances forged by interest, power games, and well-rehearsed lies, she will need to decide who she truly is. When love threatens to break the chains of a predetermined life, only one question remains. How far is someone willing to go to finally be free? Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Madison Montgomery grew up believing that her last name opened every door. In the marble-columned mansion where she had always lived, she learned to distinguish the right cutlery for each occasion, to sit with perfect posture, and to smile even when her heart was crushed. The property, situated in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, was surrounded by immaculate gardens and a pool that reflected the blue sky on sunny days. "Remember who you are," said her father, Lawrence Montgomery, whenever she left to represent the family at some event. At 25, Madison was the epitome of sophistication, brown hair always in an elegant style, designer clothes chosen with precision, a polite smile that revealed nothing. But behind that perfect facade, there was an almost palpable loneliness. The loss of her mother, Eleanor, when she was only 12 years old, left a void that nothing seemed to fill. The memories she kept were like faded photographs, the jasmine perfume Eleanor wore, the afternoons they read together in the garden, the laughter that made her eyes sparkle. Then came Victoria, the stepmother who arrived with her red lipstick and calculating gaze, turning the house into a theatre set where everyone played assigned roles. "Darling, appearance is everything," Victoria would repeat as she adjusted the collar of Madison's dress. "No one needs to know what happens behind the curtains." And what happened was dark. The whispered conversations in her father's office, the men in suits who arrived in dark cars, the envelopes exchanged discreetly. Madison grew up pretending not to notice, trying to ignore the occasional headlines in the newspapers that mentioned irregularities in Montgomery's business dealings. Victoria always found a way to silence the scandals, with smiles, generous donations, and veiled threats. "Your father built this empire from nothing," Victoria would say as she applied another layer of makeup. "Some shortcuts are necessary when you want to reach the top." It was on an autumn afternoon, with dry leaves dancing through the garden, that Victoria entered Madison's room without knocking. She sat in the vintage armchair near the window, crossed her legs encased in expensive tights, and smiled in a way that made Madison's stomach tighten. "Henry Wallace," Victoria pronounced the name as if it were a trophy. "Do you know him?" Madison did. Who wouldn't? At 32, Henry was the kind of man who appeared in business magazines but refused personal interviews. Heir to Wallace Enterprises, he was known not only for his wealth but for his integrity. He had been raised under the guidance of a widowed mother and a grandfather who believed that wealth without character was worthless. "What about him?" Madison asked, feeling an inexplicable shiver. Victoria got up, went to Madison's dressing table, and began examining the precisely aligned perfume bottles. She picked one up, opened it, sniffed it, and grimaced before putting it back. "We need him," she finally said. "Things are not good, dear. Your father's business. Let's say some investors are asking inconvenient questions. We need a new path." Madison felt the weight of those words. It wasn't the first time she had heard hints about problems in the family business, but Victoria had never been so direct. "And what do I have to do with this?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. Victoria smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. "You are beautiful, polite, and above all, a Montgomery. Henry Wallace may be honourable, but he is a man, and you, dear, will be our bridge to his world." Madison felt the blood run cold in her veins. "You want me to seduce him?" Victoria's hand clenched tightly around the perfume bottle she was holding. Don't be vulgar. I'm asking you to use your attributes to help us. After all we've done for you, it's the least you can do. No, Madison replied, standing up. I can't manipulate someone like that. It's not right. Victoria placed the bottle on the dressing table with a thud and approached, her eyes cold as ice. Without us, you're nothing. Without your father, you'd be in some miserable orphanage. It's time to give back, Madison. In the following weeks, the plan began to take shape. Madison was to casually appear at the same events as Henry, create situations where they could talk, earn his trust. Victoria researched everything about him, his hobbies, his favourite restaurants, the places he frequented. Against her will, Madison found herself involved in that game. At first, she told herself she would only talk to him, nothing more. After all, Henry Wallace would never look twice at someone from the Montgomery family. The newspapers had already published articles connecting Lawrence to dubious schemes. The first meeting took place at a contemporary art exhibition. Madison was examining a sculpture when she felt a presence beside her. What do you think? Asked a male voice, surprisingly soft for someone of his stature. She turned and found Henry Wallace, taller than he seemed in photos, with green eyes that seemed to examine not just her, but something beyond. He was dressed in a simple yet obviously expensive suit, without ostentation. I think it tries to say a lot and ends up saying nothing, she replied honestly, forgetting for a moment that she was supposed to impress him. He smiled, a genuine smile that created small wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. Exactly what I thought, but I don't know anything about art. Me neither, she confessed. My mother used to say that true art is something that makes you feel something, even if you don't understand why. Your mother seems wise, he commented. She was, Madison said, feeling that old pain. She passed away when I was 12. Henry studied her for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of that confession. I'm sorry. I lost my father very early too. It changes everything, doesn't it? That first conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough for Madison to realize that Henry Wallace was not what she expected. There was no arrogance in him, no sign of the pretension she was used to finding in the wealthy men she knew. In the following meetings, which always seemed casual but were meticulously planned by Victoria, he maintained the same demeanour, polite, kind, interested in what she had to say, yet with a certain distance, as if he were waiting to discover something more before truly getting closer. They talked about books in cafes, discussed classic movies. He never mentioned business or money. Instead, he spoke about his passion for black and white photography, about the fishing boat he inherited from his grandfather, about how he still felt uncomfortable at high society parties. Why do you keep going then? Madison asked one time, as they were having coffee in a small bookstore. Duties, he replied with a resigned smile, but I confess that lately I have found better reasons to attend. The look he gave her made her heart race, and it was at that moment, sitting on a worn wooden chair with a cup of cheap coffee in her hands, that Madison realized she was in trouble. She was no longer pretending. She was genuinely enchanted by Henry Wallace. When she returned home that night, she found Victoria waiting in the entrance hall, a glass of red wine in hand. How was it? She asked, examining Madison's face. Well, she replied vaguely. We talked about books. Victoria rolled her eyes. Books are not going to save this family, dear. We need more. Has he shown interest yet? Madison felt nauseous. Yes, I think so, but... But what? I can't go on with this, said Madison, the words rushing out. He's a good person. He doesn't deserve to be manipulated like this. Victoria set the glass down on the side table with such force that she nearly broke it. Did you fall in love with him? Is that it? How pathetic, Madison. It's not that, she lied. It's just that I can't deceive someone like this. It's not right. Victoria's face hardened. Do you know what isn't right? Ingratitude. Your father is on the brink of ruin. Everything we've built could collapse at any moment. And you care about what's right? That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking about Henry, her father, and Victoria. By morning, her decision was made. She would call Henry, make up an excuse, and distance herself. It was the right thing to do. But before she could act, Victoria entered her room again, this time with a folder in her hands. "I have something to show you," she said, throwing photos onto the bed. They were images of Madison years ago during a rebellious phase after her mother's death. There were several edited photos and screenshots of old messages taken out of context that made her seem manipulative and self-interested. "What is this?" she asked, horrified. "Insurance," Victoria replied coldly. "If you don't go through with the plan, these photos, along with some very interesting stories about your behaviour, will reach Henry, and more. I'll make sure you don't receive a cent when everything falls apart. You'll be completely alone." The following weeks were a nightmare. Madison continued seeing Henry, each smile a stab in her heart. He seemed to be getting closer, sharing stories of his childhood, talking about dreams for the future, a future that she knew was destined to be destroyed by lies. The worst came when he invited her for a weekend at his country house. It was a simple place compared to what she was used to, a wooden building near a lake with old furniture and family photographs on the walls. It was there, sitting on a porch as they watched the sunset reflected on the water, that Henry took her hand. "I never thought I would find someone like you," he said, his green eyes fixed on hers. "Someone who makes me want to be better, who makes me feel like I can trust." Madison felt tears forming. "Henry, You don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just want you to know that for the first time in a long time, I don't feel alone." When he kissed her, it was as if something inside her broke. The kiss was so sincere, so full of promises that she knew she couldn't keep. That night, lying alone in the guest room, she cried herself to sleep. 3 months after their first meeting, Henry proposed to her. It was during a simple dinner in his apartment. There was no expensive ring or grand declarations, just him kneeling beside the table, asking if she would agree to build a life with him. Madison wanted to scream, to run away, to tell the whole truth. Instead, with a heart heavy as lead, she said, "Yes." When she told Victoria, she expected to see triumph in her eyes. Instead, she saw relief. For the first time, she realised how desperate her stepmother was. "Things are worse than I imagined, aren't they?" she asked. Victoria nodded. "Your father could go to prison, Madison, and we both would end up with nothing." The wedding was quickly arranged. Victoria insisted on a lavish ceremony with hundreds of guests. Henry, always discreet, yielded to the wishes of the new family, wanting to please. The night before the wedding, Madison did not sleep. She thought about running away, disappearing. But where would she go? Who would she be without the Montgomery name? And more painfully, how would she live knowing she had destroyed the trust of the only man she truly loved? The wedding day dawned sunny. Madison let herself be dressed and made up like a doll, responding automatically to the bridesmaids' questions, smiling for the photos. When it came time for the vows, her voice did not tremble, but her heart pleaded for forgiveness. The reception was splendid, but she barely noticed. When they finally arrived at the luxury hotel where they would spend their wedding night, Madison felt physically and emotionally exhausted. "I'm going to take a bath," Henry said, kissing her on the forehead. "I'll be right back." Alone in the room, Madison sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the ring on her finger. How had she reached this point? How had she allowed Victoria's manipulations to take her so far? When Henry returned, he was wearing a hotel robe and had an envelope in his hands. His face, usually kind, was serious. "We need to talk," he said, sitting in an armchair facing her. Madison felt her heart stop. "About what?" Henry handed over the envelope. "About this." With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Henry's elegant handwriting. "Madison, I am writing this letter 2 days before our wedding, hoping you never have to read it. hoping that you find the courage I have always seen in your eyes, even when you tried to hide it. I know everything. About your father's business, about Victoria's manipulations, about the plan to lure me into saving the Montgomery family from ruin. I knew from the start. I have friends in many places, and rumours always find their ways. Even so, I allowed us to grow closer. Perhaps out of curiosity at first, then for something deeper that I cannot explain. I saw in you someone trapped in a gilded cage, someone who could be more than the name you bear. I was hoping that at some point you would choose the truth, that you would trust me enough to confess, to ask for help openly instead of continuing with this charade. But we have come this far and you haven't said anything. Therefore I cannot continue. This marriage will be annulled tomorrow, not out of anger or desire for revenge, but because a relationship built on lies will never have a solid foundation. I sincerely hope you find your own path, away from the shadows of your family. Henry. Madison felt her world collapse. The tears, held back for so long, finally overflowed. You knew, she whispered, all this time. Henry nodded. I wanted to believe there was something real between us beyond the plan. There were moments when I almost convinced myself of it. There was, she said desperately. There is. It's real, Henry. I fell in love with you. I wanted to tell you so many times. But you didn't, he completed softly. And now here we are. That night, they slept in separate rooms. In the morning, lawyers were called, papers were signed, news of the annulment spread quickly, generating speculation and gossip in social circles. Victoria was furious. Lawrence, destroyed by the failure of the plan, was now facing serious investigations. The marble mansion began to feel like a prison, each corridor filled with unspoken recriminations. A week after the annulment, Madison packed her bags. She didn't take any jewellery or expensive clothes, just the essentials, a few photos of her mother, a book Henry had given her. She left a simple note. I need to find my own path. She chose a small town, far enough away that no one would recognise her. She rented a modest apartment above a flower shop, and to the owner's surprise asked for a job. Have you worked with flowers before? Asked the grey-haired lady. No, Madison admitted, but I learned quickly. The first months were difficult. Her hands, once perfect, were now calloused and had small cuts. She learned to wash her own clothes, cook simple meals, and manage a limited budget. At night, sitting on the small balcony of her apartment, she wrote in a diary everything she wanted to say to Henry. One of these entries turned into a long, honest, painful letter. She wrote about her lonely childhood, about how her mother's death left her vulnerable to Victoria's manipulations, about the constant fear of being alone. She confessed her true love for him, without expecting forgiveness or a second chance. This letter was sent. The news of Victoria's arrest came through a local newspaper. Apparently, investigations revealed that she was the mastermind behind several fraudulent schemes. Lawrence had fled the country, abandoning everything. Madison felt no triumph, just a strange sense of relief. Finally, the ghosts of the past were beginning to dissipate. Almost a year after leaving the mansion, on a spring morning, Madison was watering the plants on the porch when she saw a familiar figure approaching. Her heart skipped a beat. Henry looked different. Longer hair, a stubble, wearing jeans and a simple shirt. But the green eyes were the same, watching her with that intensity she had missed so much. "How did you find me?" was all she could ask. "It wasn't easy," he replied. "You completely disappeared." They remained silent for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. She nodded, leading him into the small apartment. She offered coffee, which he accepted more out of courtesy than desire. "Why are you here, Henry?" He placed the cup on the table. "I received your letter. It wasn't easy to find. I've been asking around for you in this city for days." Madison paled. The letter, the confessions she had made without expecting a reply. "I didn't think you would read it," she said softly. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I did. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since then." That afternoon, they walked along a nearby trail, the trees forming a green canopy above them. Henry talked about his life after the failed marriage, about how he had questioned everything he believed in. "I was angry for a long time," he confessed. "Not just at you, but at myself, for allowing us to reach that point." "I tried to leave," Madison said, the words flowing out painfully. "Victoria threatened to destroy me. She said she would spread lies, that she would leave me with nothing. I was afraid. But that doesn't justify what I did. I should have been stronger." Henry took her hand, a gesture so familiar that it made her heart ache. "We all have our moments of weakness, Madison. I do too. When I read your letter, I realized I was stuck in the past as much as you were." "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, tears beginning to fall. "I just want you to know that what I felt, what I feel for you, is real. It always was." "I know that now," he replied softly. "And I'm here because I believe in second chances. It won't be easy nor quick, but I'm willing to try if you are." The rebuilding was slow. They started with weekly calls, occasional letters, short visits. Madison continued working at the flower shop, building an independent life. Henry respected her space, never pushing, always honest about his own fears and doubts. 3 years later, they remarried. This time, it was an intimate ceremony in a blooming garden, just with close friends. Madison wore a simple dress and flowers in her hair. Henry, a suit without a tie. The vows were written by themselves, sincere words about forgiveness, new beginnings, and conscious love. They chose to live in a modest house near the sea, far from the circles they had once frequented. Henry continued managing his businesses, now focused on sustainable and social projects. Madison opened her own flower shop, turning her newfound passion into a thriving small business. They never heard from Victoria or Lawrence again. It was as if that part of their lives had been sealed in a chest and cast into the sea. Sometimes Madison would still wake up from nightmares about the marble mansion, about closed doors and whispered secrets. In those moments, Henry would hold her in silence, a silent reminder that she was no longer trapped in that life. One autumn afternoon, sitting on the porch of their house, watching the waves break on the beach, Henry asked, "Do you regret it? Everything that happened?" Madison reflected for a moment, watching the sun begin to set on the horizon. "I regret allowing fear to control me for so long, for not trusting you from the start." She paused, intertwining her fingers with his. "But I can't regret the path that brought us here. It taught me who I really am, beyond the Montgomery name." Henry smiled, that smile that still made her heart race after all these years. "And who are you, Madison Wallace?" "Someone who finally learned that true wealth has nothing to do with marble or mansions," she replied, leaning in to kiss him. "It has to do with the courage to start over even when it seems impossible." The sea breeze tousled their hair, bringing the smell of salt and fulfilled promises. The life they built wasn't perfect. No life is, but it was authentic. And that, Madison had learned, was worth more than all the privileges she had left behind. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.